Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Nun in Sanhedrin. And here we get into the real punishments, the four types of executions, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Asurim Batzar V'Shivya. We're actually at the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom of Mem Testament Beis, yesterday's daf. So the Mishnah had said that there are 4 misas. Okay, the Gemara had talked about that these are really questions of which one's more severe than the other one. Like we saw in the case where the order is important, in the case of the Dam Nida, when you're trying to purify it, other cases where it's only a mitzvah. But here we're talking about the 4 types of executions. So we have a famous machlokas, the Mishnah said, between the Tanakama, like we hold like in Rav Shimon. The Tanakama holds that the severity is what? Skila sreifa hereg mechanek. Skila is stoning. Of course, after you push him off from the cliff, as we learned, from the height, he might die by that. Sreifa is burning on the inside. Hereg is decapitation. Hereg is also called in the Gemara sayif, by the sword. They decapitate him with the sword, like the Arabs known to do, right? It's a tradition that they have. And chenek, which is strangulation, where they strangle him. Now, that's the order according to Chacham. The Reb Shimon says, no, the order is sreifa skila. Sreifa is more severe than skila. That's what we're going to talk about today. And chenek is more severe than hereg. Now, so he reverses the Chacham. If you call the Chacham 1, 2, 3, 4, their order is 2, 1, 4, 3. That's Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon is 2, 1. Compared to the Chachamim, Reb Shimon's order is 2, 1, and then 4, 3. But everybody agrees that 1 and 2, skila and sreifa, are more stringent than hereg and chenek. What's an afkamina? What stringent they are? Because you always need the more severe punishment in order to give them the proper kapara. So if a person did a sin that required 2 different executions, or the chayiv 2 executions for 2 different sins, you can't kill him twice. That's the fundamental idea of humanity, is that you can't kill somebody twice. You got to give him the more severe ones to have a proper kapara, proper atonement. Now, how do we know this order? So the Gemara at the bottom of Mem Testament Beis, 3 lines from on page, skila chamura misreifa. According to the Tanakama now, not according to B'Shim, we're explaining Tanakama first, that the order of skila, sreifa, and chenek. Skila chamura misreifa. Skila is more severe than sreifa. How do you know? You know why? Because that's the punishment that's given out for blasphemers and for idol worshippers. That's a terrible thing. So if that's the punishment for those type of terrible sins, that must be the most severe. My chumrah, what's the chumrah? Why is it so severe? What's severe about it? Because he said it's attack on the fundamental beliefs of our religion. So maybe sreifa is more severe. Maybe that should be the order. Again, if you're chayiv 2, which one would you get? Maybe you should get sreifa. Why? A bas kohen a daughter of a kohen who commits adultery gets sreifa. Now, let's understand. So let's explain something very simple. When it comes to adultery, meaning a man who sleeps with another woman, if she's not married, is not committing adultery. Adultery is if a married woman sleeps with a man that's not her husband. Okay. Now, what is the punishment for that? If she's an arusa, she's only engaged, betrothed. In a regular case, she gets skila. If she's fully married, she gets chenek, which is a lesser punishment. Why is that? Because if she's engaged, she's also hurting her father. She's not only hurting herself and her husband, but she's also come on her father, because she's still in her father's house. So that's an arusa gets skila and a sua gets chenek. Right? A regular punishment for adultery, for regular married woman gets adultery, the punishment is chenek, a less severe than skila. What about a bas kohen? The pasuk says,
severity of, isn't it related to the severity of the pain? I mean,
yeah.
What do you say it's worse?
Yes, yeah. It could be it's the pain also. Yes. It's a bigger pain. You could say that. But there's a machlokas. What's the bigger pain? Sreifa or skila? People haven't come back yet to tell us which one was it, But that's the argument over here, which is more severe in pain and therefore atonement. So that when it comes to a bas kohen, though, that's in a regular case. A bas Yisrael, again, it's important to get that clear in your minds first. A regular Jewish woman who commits adultery, if she's betrothed, she has a more severe punishment of skila because she's also hurting her father. She's embarrassing her father. In the case of a married woman, she's already hagum, so to speak. She's already been, she's no longer a virgin. She's no longer in her father's house. and she's hurting herself and her husband, but she's not considered hurting her father. A bas Kohen who commits adultery, what does the pasuk say? Quotes it on mid-base here. Bas ish Kohen ki seichel liznos, if she profanes herself and commits adultery, esavia hi mechalelas. She is profaning her father who's a Kohen. But eish tisar, if she gets burned. Now, so that's what the Gemara says now at the bottom of Mem Tes and Beis, Adarabba. Maybe Sreifa is more severe. Shekenit lebas Kohen shezinsa. What's so severe about it? My Chumer, what's so severe? Shekem machala severe. She is profaning her father, who's a Kohen. So if until now he was called Kodesh, now he's called Chol. So maybe, how do you know that Skila is more severe? Maybe Sreifa is. The answer is Kasav Rabban at the top of Nun now. Then Nesua Yotzal Sreifa Lo. I said before that a Bas Kohen who commits adultery, the pasuk says she gets Sreifa. Who is that? Is that a married Bas Kohen or a betrothed Bas Kohen? Is she fully Ratan? The Rabbanan say that it's going on in Nesua Yotzal Sreifa V'lo Arusa, not an Arusa, meaning. Yeah, an arusa is not nesua yotzel sreifa. Only if she's a bas Kohen who's married, she gets sreifa. Not an arusa. An arusa still gets skila, like a regular girl, like a regular Israelis who commits adultery when she's an arusa. Umida afkar achmar arusa beskila. Since the Torah excluded, varied the punishment of a arusa. An arusa, Rashi says a bas Kohen. In other words, a bas Kohen who's married who commits adultery, she gets burning. But if she's an arusa, where she's more embarrassing her father and ruining him, because if she's married already, she's not so in her father's house anymore. But if she's an arusa, she's in her father's house, the Torah says, no, a regular bas Kohen who's married and commits adultery, she gets sreifa. But if she's an arusa, she gets skila. That shows you that skila is more chamish. Shmamina skila chamura. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. Rashi turns this around a little bit. Rashi says that how do the Rabbanan know? The pasuk of bas Kohen ki seichel liznos, Michael, when it says if a girl who's a bas Kohen commits adultery, she's burned, it doesn't say arusa or nesua. It says it's stam, as we're going to see. Reb Shimon will say, says it's stam, it applies to both. So how do the Rabbanan know that it's not? The answer is it goes back to the idea, Rashi explains in the long Rashi, that the Rabbanan really say that skila is more chomer than sreifa, like he said before, because because that's what a blasphemer and an idol worshiper get, because they have attacked. It's an attack on the fundamental belief that we believe in God. So that's the main reason. Once you know that skila is more chomer than sreifa, then it makes sense to say when the pasuk says that a bas Kohen is going to get sreifa, why should she get sreifa if skila is worse? And arusa is worse. So therefore he says, a bas Kohen who gets sreifa, you know who's bas Kohen? Only if she's fully married. But if she's an arusa who normally gets skila, we're not going to diminish her punishment and say, we're going to go down from a more severe punishment of skila that a regular bas Yisrael gets and be makel on her now and say, no, she's only going to get sreifa. You're not going to do that because skila, according to Rabbanan, is worse than sreifa. So we're saying over here, every betrothed girl gets skila. And if she's a bas Kohen, you're going to give her an easier punishment, just the opposite. She's profaning the priesthood. And therefore, you don't say it doesn't apply to her, it only applies to Nesua. That's how the Rabbanan learn. In the third line of Daf Nun, skila chamor misayef. Okay, we assume that already. Everybody holds that 1 and 2, skila and sreifa, are more chomer than 3 and 4. But how do we know that skila is chomer? How do we know that skila is more stringent than decapitation, sayef, or hereg? Like we said, skila is more chomer because he said you give that to the blasphemer and the idol worshiper. My chomer, what's the severity? Karama, like we said, because poshet yad, because you're poshet yad beikar, because you've attacked the fundamental beliefs. How do you kill the people of the Erni Dachas? We'll talk about the Erni Dachas in more detail later on, but the Erni Dachas is killed by the Sayef. So maybe that should be stringent. My Chomer, she came in one of it. You know the Chomer of Erni Dachas, that not only are they killed, but in all other cases, except that you don't destroy their assets. Here, you take everything into the center of the town and you burn it all down, their assets. So maybe that's more stringent. What is worse? What is more severe in punishment? The person who incites them, or the people who were incited? The people who and as a person who subverted the Jewish city to do avodah zarah, or the people who were subverted. We'll see that it's the one who subverts them because what's his punishment? According to Rabbanan, we'll see. Reb Shimon disagrees, but says the first part of the Bryce says that the one who incites people in achas gets skila. And therefore, what do you see? That the inciter gets skila, whereas the incited people, what do they get? Hereg, right? They get hereg, they get saif. So you see that skila is more chomer than saif. That's how we know. In other words, if you say, well, is skila worse because it's poshet yad beikar, or is hereg or saif and hereg are the same thing, right? Are that more chomer? Why? Because you see, the Irani Dachas people get killed with a saif, and their money is destroyed, their assets are destroyed. So maybe that's more stringent. That's more of a punishment that their heirs cannot inherit anything. Is that no? The answer is that you could tell from the fact that the inciter has a worse punishment than the inciter should have a worse punishment. He's worse, and the incited only have hereg, and the inciter gets skila. So you see that skila is more chomer. Skila chomer mechanik. Skila is also more severe than strangulation. As we said, because skila goes to the blasphemers. What's its stringency? Like we said, because you're a poshet, because you denied God. Chenek should be more chomer, strangulation, because of a person who strikes his parents, injures, wounds his parents, draws blood, he gets chenek. So what's so severe about that? Why is this such a severe sin? Because it says so there's like the two psukim. It's not like Xer Shava. The point is that they're compared. The covet of your fathers compared to the covet of Hashem. So maybe that's a more severe sin, and therefore that should be more of a severe punishment. So again, since the Torah said a regular Bas Yisrael, again, for punishment is chenek, and a rusa, who is worse because she's profaning her father's house too, even if she's not a bas kohen, bas Yisrael. The rusa bas Yisrael mekal nesua, bas Yisrael mechanik and mechanik l'skila. Since the Torah said, the Torah excluded, says right, a regular married woman gets chenek. If she's an arusa and she commits adultery, she gets skila, and that's worse because now she's profaning her father. Rashi says, she's embarrassing her father's case too. Rashi says it at the right where the lines get narrow, and also near the bottom before the lines get wide. She's bad to not only bad God against God, there's more shame when a arusa, when a betrothed girl commits adultery, that's more of a betrayal and an embarrassment more than a married girl. Shekvar nifkama, a girl who's married already, okay, she's already pagum, so to speak, she's no longer a virgin, she's no longer in her father's house. So since over here you see that an arusa gets a bigger punishment than it's a bigger sin than an asua, and the Torah says by the Surah she gets chenek, and by Rusa she gets skila. That shows you that skila is more chomer than chenek.
Is done by like hanging?
Pardon?
Chenek, is that hanging?
No, chenek is strangulation.
What is it like?
Strangulation. They take a cloth and strangle them. How do you strangle somebody? Take a rope, or you take a handkerchief, a thick handkerchief, so that it shouldn't be painful. We'll talk about it in more detail later on. Like a big cloth, and they put it on thing and they strangle them. That's how you strangle people, right? You strangle them. Huh? It's not hanging. It's not hanging. We talked about hanging, that you're supposed to hang the person who was stoned afterwards. You stand him for a short period of time, as we saw in the Gemara, just because you have to be yotzei, but you shouldn't leave him up there too long. And we talk about a man or a woman, etc., etc. Okay, machlok is about to include a man and a woman there too, but that's strangulation. Yeah. So that's what we said. So again, sreifa chamura misayev. Now, burning, number 2, according in the Rabbanan's list, is more severe than hereg, which is sayev. Now, then number 3, sheken nidl bas kohen shizitz. Again, the same idea. A bas kohen who commits adultery, or a bas kohen commits adultery, she gets sreifa. Umay chomer, she came zavia because she's embarrassing her father, right? She's profaning her father. Zadarab, a saif chomer, she came nitlan shindachs. We had these ideas before. Saif should be more chomer. Why? Because that's what you give to the people of Eridachas, to the incited crowd. Umay chomer, she came out of it, and the chomer is their severity is why? Because you destroy the money. He says, so never avia baskila. It says avia baskila here by what? By a Bas Yisrael who's a arusa commits adultery. When it comes to a bas kohen, just like by skila, we said skila is more chomer than saif, as we proved before. Afavia Amar B'Sreifa, also Sreifa Chamor Misayif. So it's based on the fact, how do we know that Sreifa is more Chamor than Sayif? Because Skila is more Chamor than Sayif, and there's a hekesh between the two Psukim Aviyah where it talks about Skila of a Bas Yisrael to the Sreifa of a Bas Kohen. Sreifa Chamor Mechenek, the Gemara goes on. Sreifa is more severe than Chenek, which is number 4 in the list of Kohen. Shekenyet LeBas Kohen, she's Insa. Again, because she's burned. A Bas Kohen who commits adultery. My Chomer Karam, like we said, because she profaned her father. Adarabba. Chenek Chomer Shekenyet LeMakov Avima. Chenek Shemima Sever, because you what? Because it's given to one who wounds his parents. So my Chomer Sheken Hukish Kvod on the Kavod HaMakom, because the Kavod Avicha and Kavod HaMakom is compared. So Midaf Krechman Lesua Bas Kohen Mechlan Lesua Bas Yisrael Mechanik Lesreifa. Again, since we're going according to Rabbanan that the Bas Kohen who gets Sreifa is only the married one. Okay, but since the Torah said a regular Bas Yisrael who commits adultery and she's married, what does she get? Chenek. But if she's a Bas Kohen, she gets Sreifa. That shows you that Sreifa is more Chanek. More Chanek. Midafter Achman, it is more Chomer. Midafter Achmanim in a Sua Bas Kohen. And a Sua Bas Kohen, Mechal the Sua Bas Yisrael. She goes from Chenek of a Bas Yisrael to Sreifa. Torah varied her punishment. Shma Mina Sreifa Chamura. Sayif Chomer Mechanik. Number 3 is more Chomer than Chenek. Shkein Yitlan Sherni Dachas. Again, my Chomer, like we said, Shkein Manoah, because their money is destroyed. So that's why it's more severe. And that should be more Chomer. Adarabba Chenek Chomer, maybe Chenek Shkein Yitlabakav Imo. My Chomer Shkein Hukish, because it's compared to the cover of Hashem. Afilochi Poshit Yad Beikar Adav. Like we say, like the Chum hold by Skila of Avodah Zarah over here, when you committed adultery also, you committed idolatry, that Yaron Shani Dachas committed idolatry in a group, in a whole city, that's considered worse, and therefore that's considered worse than the punishment, than wounding a parent, and it's considered a more severe, more stringent sin, and therefore we say that it must be that hereg that you get for Irni Dachas is more stringent than Chenek. So the point is, again, if you did 2 sins and you're chayav for 1 hereg and 1 Chenek, you get the hereg, which is the more severe, so you'll have a proper atonement. Now Reb Shimon says no. He disagrees. He says, what's the order? Sreifa, Skila, right? Sreifa, Skila, Chenek and hereg, not hereg and Chenek, but Chenek and hereg. Reb Shimon Omer, Sreifa Chamur Miskila. Why does he say that? We said that's what a Bas Kohen gets. Umay Chomer, what's her Chomer? Why is it more stringent? She profanes her father. Like the Rabbanan said. The Rabbanan said Skil is worse because Umay Chomer, what's it stringent? Because you've attacked the fundamental belief. As Reb Shimon Tamei, Reb Shimon goes to course reason to Amar Achas Arusa Bachnasu Yas L'Sreifa. Again, a Bas Kohen who commits adultery, who gets Sreifa, according to Reb Shimon, Pasuk says Bas Kohen ki seichel liznos. Doesn't say Arusa or Nesua. He holds that they all get Sreifa. So if they all get Sreifa, Minaf Rachman Arusa Bas Kohen, Arusa Bas Yisrael who commits adultery gets what? Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila. But if she's a Bas Kohen, she gets Sreifa. What does that tell you? That Sreifa is worse. That Sreifa is worse than Skila. Because a regular Bas Yisrael who commits adultery, an Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila, and Arusa Bas Kohen gets Sreifa. That tells you Sreifa is Chomer. Again, because Reb Shimon holds that Bas Kohen that gets Sreifa applies to both Arusa and Nesua. Shemaim no Sreifa Chamor. Sreifa Chamor Michenek. And that Sreifa is more Chomer than Chenek. We had that before she came into Bas Kohen, she's Insa. Right? That's what we see as Sreifa. Ma Chomer Kadamran, because he said, because she profanes her father. Adarabba Chenek Chomer Shekain Nit L'Makav Avimo. Ma Chomer Shekain Hukish Kvodim L'Kavod HaMakom. Right? So this is really the same thing we had before by the Chachamim. When we said Sreifa is more Chomer, Sreifa is more Chomer than Chenek. If you look up above, we had the same thing when it comes to Chachamim, right? Sreifa Chamor Mecherik Shein L'Bas Kohen Shein L'Machom Kamen. Adarabba Chomer Shekain Nit L'Makav Avimo. So it's the same words. Midaf Rachman L'Sua Bas Kohen Mechlal L'Sua Bas Yisrael Mechanik L'Sreifa. But since the Torah says what? That if she's married, a married woman who commits adultery, Nesua, she gets what? Chenek. And if she's a Bas Kohen, she gets Sreifa. That shows you that Sreifa is worse. Shemaim no Sreifa Chamor. Sreifa Chamor Misayef. 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Sreifa Chamor Misayef. Sreifa is more stringent than Sayef. She can't hit Bas Kohen again. So my Chomer Karama, because she profanes her father. Adarabba Sayef Chomer she can't hit Lan Sherni Dach. It's the same Gemara, the same idea we had before. My Chomer she can't of it because their money is destroyed. Amrit. Okay. So how do we know that? What? How do we know that Sreifa is more chomer than Sayef? right? And so he said, right? We said why? Because it gives you give that to a bas kohen shezin. So and saif should be more chomer though, because it gets already tachas where the money's destroyed. Amr which is a more severe punishment? Which a bigger sin? Let's say, which is a more severe sin? The one who incites or the one who are incited? The one who is incites. And what does the madiach get? Reb Shimon says Rashi, the top line on Amid Beis in Rashi. Reb Shimon Islay. Not like the Rabbanan who said that the Madich and gets skila, he gets chenek. Okay, so and we see over here gets chenek. Oh, and therefore you have a kal v'chomer. Uma chenek shechomer misayef. Chenek is more severe than sayef. Why? Because the ansher nidachas gets sayef, the people who the ones who were incited, but the one who incited them gets chenek, according to Reb Shimon. So if chenek is more severe than sayif, uma chenek shechomer misayif. Why? Because the inciter gets chenek, whereas the incited people get sayif. Streifa chomer mimenu, and yet streifa is more severe than chenek, as we proved before. That was what we said. It was a previous commercial before. Why? Because a married woman, the bas Yisrael goes from chenek to streifa if she's a bas kohen. So therefore, you see that so ma chenek shechomer misayif is more chomer than saif, as we just said, because the inciter is worse than the incited ones. Streifa chamura mimenu, but streifa we proved before is more stringent, more severe than chenek. So saif akal saif, which is less than chenek. Why? Because the incited gets saif and the inciter gets chenek. So lokoshkein, certainly streifa is more stringent than, more severe than saif. Skila chamura michenek. Skila is more chomer than chenek. Even according to Shimon, skila is number 2. And chenek is what? Number 3. Why is skila more chomer? Again, because giving it to them. Umay chomer kadam, like we said, because you were poshet yad beikar adarabba chenek chomer sheken nit l'makav v'umay chomer sheken hukush l'kavod hamakam. Again, mid after Rahman Allah Rusa Bas Yisrael, and Rusa Bas Yisrael, if she commits adultery, guess what? Skila. Michlal Nesua Bas Yisrael bechenek, and it goes from chenek to skila. If she's married, she gets chenek. If she's only betrothed, doesn't get chenek, she gets skila. So since the Torah excluded from chenek and went to skila, shma mina skila chamor. You see that skila is more chomer than chenek. Skila chamor misayif also. Skila is more stringent, more severe than sayif. Why she can't live a god? Again, because skila is given to the blasphemers and the of the avodah zarah. Adarabba, sayif chomer shekeni le'shidach my chomer shekeni manava, because their money is destroyed. Maybe you would say that the sin of Yernidachis is worse. Which is worse, the inciter or the inciter of Yom the inciter? The kal v'chomer, according to Reb Shimon, what does the Madiach get? He gets chenek. The kal v'chomer, ma chenek shechomer misayif. Chenek is more stringent than sayif. Why? Because the inciter gets chenek, the incited get sayif, get hereg. Skila chamura mimenu. Skila is more chomer than chenek, as we proved before. So saif akal koshkin, certainly saif would also be less severe than skila. Chenek chomer misayif. Again, what the Rabbanan say that the order is hereg is number 3, saif is number 3, and chenek is number 4. Shimon says the other way around. Chenek chomer misayif. Why should chenek is given to the ones who wound their parents. My chomer kadamran, because it's compared to the covenant of Hashem. You've gone against, you've hurt the honor of your parents, and that's like hurting God. The sword, the decapitation, so my chomer came out of it. That's more severe because they have, see, the money said, which is stronger, which is a more severe sin, the one who incited them or the incited people. The Tanya we learn here, he tells you the whole brisa. According to Rabbanan, Reb Shimon over bechenek, so that's more chenek, and therefore you see that chenek is more severe than sayif. Why? Because the inciter gets chenek, and the incited ones get hereg. So that shows you that chenek is more severe than hereg, and therefore the order of, according to Reb Shimon, is streifa skila, chenek, and hereg. That's the order according to Reb Shimon. Margala b'pumi Rabbi Yochanan. You say the following thing. Now Marasa bas kohen shezin. So listen carefully. And now Marasa, that means that she's an arusa bas kohen shezin. So what does she get? Skila. Is that really the case? Didn't we just say it's streifa? No, according to Reb Shimon, it's streifa. According to Rachachamim, who gets streifa only if she's fully married, not the arusa. So now Marasa Bas Kohen Shezinsa Beskila. Reb Shimon over Sreifa. Reb Shimon says Sreifa because he says that the pasuk of Bas Kohen applies to both Rusa and Nesua. Zinsa Me'avia. Let's say she committed adultery with her father. Now, we didn't discuss this yet, but that's going to be a Gemara later. Anyone who commits adultery with the father, what's the punishment for that? Punishment is Sreifa, married or not. If she committed adultery with her father, the punishment is Sreifa. Why? Because if it pasuk says if a man commits if a man sleeps with a mother and a daughter, the punishment is Sreifa. Well, if it's his wife's daughter, his daughter is also his wife's daughter, get punishment Sreifa. So again, a regular Namarasa commits adultery, she gets skila. Shimon says Sreifa. Namarasa, who's a Bas Kohen, skila according to Chacham, Sreifa according to Reb Shimon. Zinsa me'avia, if she committed adultery with her father, biskila. Now that's he gets skila. Reb Shimon over Sreifa. Now why is that? Why did the Chacham say Zinsa me'avia biskila? If she's a Bas Kohen, according to the Chachamim, skila is worse than Sreifa. What do we mean by that? I just said that if a man sleeps with his daughter, the punishment for that, of course, if they do it b'mezid, etc., is Sreifa. So why would the Chachamim say Zinsa me'avia b'skila? Because she's over on two things over here. Number one, she is a Bas Kohen, and she's an Arusa, right? She's an Arusa. What's the punishment for an Arusa? Even if she's a Bas Kohen who commits adultery, skila. But she's also punished. She also has a punishment of Sreifa for sleeping with her father. But what's more severe according to the Chachamim? Skila. Therefore, she would get skila. If a regular girl commits adultery with her father, she gets Sreifa, right? She gets Sreifa. But if she's a betrothed woman, chiv is skila. And therefore, skila is worse. Reb Shimon says Sreifa because Reb Shimon says Sreifa is more chamer. So she has two punishments hanging over her: skila and Sreifa. According to Reb Shimon, she gets Sreifa. Mike Mashmuam. What's the chiddush? The Rabbanan that tells you Nesua yatzes l'Sreifa, only a bird who's fully married to Sreifa. Lo Arusa. Arusa doesn't get a Sreifa and not skila. Even though if she slept with her father, in other words, in the first case, now Amarasa Bas Kohen Shezinsa, she gets a Arusa. Only a Nesua Bas Kohen. An Asur Bas Kohen gets Sreifa, not an Arusa. And if she slept with her father, the chiddush is that you get the worst one, which is skila. Reb Shimon, Achas Arusa, Achas Nesua, Yachas Sreifa, they're both Sreifa. The time am I, Mishum the Rabbanan skila chamor, as we said, the Rabbanan skila is more chamor, and therefore when she's chayiv both skila and Sreifa, she gets chamor. Reb Shimon Sreifa chamora. Nafkaminal Mishus chayv shemisus. That's nafkamin. If you're chayv two misus bezdin, did mechamor, you get the more chamor one. According to Reb Shimon, Sreifa is more chamor, so we get that one. According to Chacham, skila is more chamor, and that's if you're chayiv two. According to the Rabbanan, Manam Marasa, who committed adultery, there is no Sreifa there because she only gets skila anyway. Her punishment is skila. He also, when it talks about a Bas Kohen Shezinsa, that's chayiv Sreifa, that pasuk is only talking about an Asua. And Reb Shimon says Sreifa, right? But Zinsa Me'avia, where she's chayiv both Sreifa and skila, according to Chacham, we get skila. According to Reb Shimon, the punishment for both is Sreifa. My Reb Shimon, what's Reb Shimon based on? What's Reb Shimon based on? At the time Reb Shimon Omer. Shnei Klos Nemer Bas Kohen. There were two clauses written about Bas Kohen. What do we mean by that? Rashi says that the Shnei Klalos are Achas Barusa V'Achas Masua, Kloma Sheklala Kosuv Be'eshes Ish, Mosi Masanof and Afas, Bas Kohen Mashma B'Chenek. Everybody should get Chenek. Ukshosi Arusa L'Skila, Bas Kohen Mashma. Hainu Shnei Klalos. In other words, that there's two clauses that talks about a married woman who gets chenek, and the pasuk would have been a Bas Kohen also until the pasuk took it out, and the pasuk said she gets reifa. And the same thing by Arusa. Arusa normally gets skila if she commits adultery. Bas Kohen would also be mashma that way. So the Gemara says, Shimon says Shnei Klos and Bas Kohen says Gemara says Bas Kohen v'lo Bas Yisrael. Those clauses are by Bas Yisrael also. Then a Sua gets chenek and a Arusa gets a skila. Ema afra Bas Kohen. The Hotzia Kasav Nesua Bachlal Nesua. Listen carefully. The pasuk is if she's a Bas Kohen, she's not like a regular Nesua who gets chenek. What does she get? Sreifa. The Arusa Machlal Arusa. She's not like a regular Arusa who gets skila for committing adultery. She gets Sreifa. So Mak Shahotzia Kasav Nesua Machlal Nesua. Just like when she said, what if she's fully married and she's a Bas Kohen and commits adultery, she doesn't get chenek. Rather, she gets Sreifa lahachmer because Sreifa is certainly more chamor than chenek. When the pasuk says what? That an Arusa Bas Kohen who commits adultery, she doesn't get the regular punishment from skila, she gets sreifa lahachmir. That's how Reb Shimon really knows that sreifa is more chamor than skila, because the pasuk says that there's a regular rule. A regular Bas Yisrael who commits adultery when she's married gets chenek. When she is arusa, she gets skila. Now, if she's a Bas Kohen, she always gets sreifa, according to Reb Shimon. Pasuk reads the way it is. So just like if she is an asua, she goes from chenek to sreifa, and that's more chomer. So when she goes from by arusa, when she goes from skila to sreifa, that's also more of a chumrah. That shows you that sreifa is more chomer than skila. Zomei nesua Bas Kohen. Now listen to this. Let's say Adam lied and said this Bas Kohen committed adultery. What would be her punishment if she committed adultery? Sreifa, right? Sreifa. However, not the man who committed adultery with the adulterer doesn't get sreifa, because it says he ba'ishti sarv, she's burned. He would get the regular punishment of a man who committed adultery. If he committed adultery with a married woman, it would be chenek. With a betrothed woman, she would get skila. So he just tells you zomein nisu. Now, what happens if they were liars? They were turned out to be liars. A and B, the first lie were liars about them. They get the punishment that they wanted to inflict on her, but they don't get sreifa, because pasuk is only she gets sreifa. So zomei nesu Bas Kohen, b'chlal zomei nesu Bas Yisrael, meaning that they would get skila and if it's nesua they get chenek. Zomei arusa Bas Kohen, b'chlal zomei arusa Bas Yisrael. In other words, if they were liars and they were talking about a fully married Bas Kohen, they would only get chenek, like an asua Bas Yisrael. And if they were talking about a betrothed Bas Kohen, they would get skila like a regular Bas Yisrael. Even though she would get, had she really committed adultery, she would get sreifa. But the zomamin and the adulterer get the regular punishment as if they committed adultery with a Bas Yisrael, not with a Bas Kohen. Here's the pasuk: Bas Ish Kohen ki seichel, when she starts profaning herself. Yachal afilu chila as Shabbos. Maybe it's talking about Mechal Shabbos too. She is Mechalo, profane Shabbos. That's what we're talking about. If she committed adultery, if she was Mechal Shabbos, maybe she should get sreifa. Tamar Lomer. The pasuk says, Michael, what does it say? Bas Ish Kohen ki seichel liznos esavia hi mechalelas ba'eish tisarev. Right? Liznos bechil and Shabbos nus, because we're talking about profaning vayis nus. Yachal afilu pnuya. What happens if she's not married? Maybe if she's not married also, she should also get sreifa. It says Bas, it doesn't say, it says Bas Ish Kohen, the daughter of a man who's a Kohen. If she commits adultery, she should be burnt. So maybe we're talking about
adultery.
Pardon? It's not adultery, yeah. But don't call it adultery. It says Kizech Listen. She was fooling around. Maybe she should also be burnt. Maybe that's what it means. She was promiscuous, right? It says over here, here it says Avia. Where does it say Avia? It says Avia by Motzi Shemra. What's Motzi Shemra? A man marries a woman. She was already engaged to him. He marries a woman. He claims she committed adultery. She wasn't a virgin. I checked her out, and the wedding night she wasn't. So there's a whole thing over there, right? If he's a liar, he has to give her $100, give the father $100, and stay married to her, etc. And if it's really true, then you kill her. And it says over there she's a nara. And there also says Avia. Malon's nus imzika. Over there, that's nus is what? With a connection to the husband. She had a husband over there. She was a husband. Afkan's nus imzika's bas. Here it also means that she was married. She was betrothed. Basishkom betrothed or married. Maybe it says Avias Mechalelas if she commits adultery with her father. Maybe she's only burnt if she commits adultery with her father, not with anybody else. Rashi points out, the Gemara will say to them, what do you mean? Anybody who commits adultery with her father gets burned, not just a Bas Kohen. How could you have such a... The Gemara will talk about that later on. We're going to deal with all these details later on. But maybe that's what it means. It doesn't say he gets if it would be with the father, he's also mechal himself. He mechaleles. She's the one profaning. If the father would be sleeping, if it would be the father sleeping with her, he's mechal himself. Not that she's mechal. He mechal. Hamani mekayim avia. So never kind of avia. It says over here avia by Bas Kohen. It says by Bas Yisrael Anara who is married, who is married and committed adultery as an arusa, because the husband says, when I married her on the wedding night, I realized that she was already committed adultery before. Nara So maybe over there, but there it says a narav hi arusa, because we're talking about that she committed adultery while she was in Rusa. He married her now, but he found on the wedding night that she committed adultery while she was in Rusa. Maybe Afkan narav, maybe also the Bas Kohen also is only a nara and she's in a Rusa. But Nara, if she's beyond 12 and a half, she's a Bogeres V'hinasua, and she's fully married. Oh, Bogeres V'hirusa, or she's past 12 and a half and she's still betrothed. Oh, Bogeres V'hinasua, or if she's over 12 and a half and she's also married. Rafil Skin, even she's much older. Minan, how do I know, Kontrab Shimon, that any Bas Kohen who's connected to a husband in any way, Arusa and Asua, no matter what age, she and obviously she has to be bat mitzvah, be chayev, that she'd be chayev sreifa. Tamalomer ubas kohen mikom makom. The extra vav, Rashi tells us, like Rabbi Kiva learns, the extra vav ubas kohen mikom makom. Any bas kohen who is connected to a husband in some way, betrothed or fully married, and she commits adultery, she is burned. Mikom makom. Bas kohen ain ubas kohen mikom makom. Bas kohen ain the elishanis kohen. The way it says bas kohen, maybe it means if she's married to a kohen. You know, in the olden days, the kohenim would always marry Bas Kohen to keep it in the family. Ainli Elshin, this is Lakohen. This is what if she's married to Levi or Yisrael, Lavi Kachavim. How can you be married to another Kachavim? Does that marriage chal? So the Mepharshim all deal with that. Some say that it means Rav Kachavim after you're Megayer, or the Rashash says that it's only talking about Nissus means really to a Levi Yisrael. Rav Kachavim just throws in there. L'chalalu mamzer. Kedushin's chal, according, if you don't like a Bekiva, or sometimes even according to some say, even according to Bekiva, Kedushin's not tofes by chayv lavan only if it's she'er, if it's like incestuous. But if it's halal or a mamzer, right? How do we know that if she's married to anybody other than a Kohen? Levi, Yisrael, Chavim, halal, mamzer, how do I know that? Says Talmud Lomer, ubas ish Kohen, bas ish Kohen, after b'shein kahanas, the extra ish tells you over there that the main thing is that her father's a Kohen. We don't care who she's married to. The key is if her father is a Kohen. Basish Rashi says Ish Yisera. The father has to be a Kohen. We don't care about the husband. He could be anybody. He besreifa. She gets burned. Vein boila besreifa. That's he besreifa. She her adulterer, the one she had bia with, doesn't get sreifa. What would he get? He would get the regular punishment of committing adultery. If she's an arusa, he would get skila. If she's a nesu, he would get chenek. He besreifa, she besreifa, veins me besreifa. Again, only she gets burned, not her boel, and not Adam Zoman who tried to commit her, and then they proved the liars. The rule is kasher zamam asisal kasher zam lasas la'achiv. Right, that he wanted to do them, and over here, the pasuk excludes. They don't get the exact same punishment. They would be killed, Adam Zoman, but not by a sreifa, but rather the regular punishment of an adulterer. Blezer Omer, esavia b'sreifa v'eschamia b'skila. If she commits adultery with her father, she gets sreifa. If she commits adultery with her father-in-law, she gets skila, because that's based on these pasuk esavia mechas only with the father. What's the pshat in that? We'll say the Gemara is going to deal. Amar Mar, we'll pick it up from here tomorrow. Mitzvah going to deal with explaining all these little details and what's the point of Reb Lezer. Rashi says, "L'kamen boy, my comer. What's Reb Lezer teaching me over here? What's his chiddush?" And the Gemara will explain that later on. All right, picking from here tomorrow. Mitzvah. Have a good day, everybody. Kol tov.